Good evening. Welcome to News Plus here on Loveworld USA. I'm Barbara Sam.
And I'm TGK Dre.
Let's take a quick look at the top news story headlines for today. 7 die in Northeast Philadelphia plane crash. U.S. House bill bans trans women from women's school sports. Interior Secretary confirmed sparks fly on other cabinet nomination hearings. Uncertainty over U.S. tariffs leave global markets on edge. DRC conflict, M23 rebels seize Goma. France pushes UN resolution against Rwanda. And now to the news. Further details have emerged on the plane crash yesterday in Northeast Philadelphia. According to a statement from the Federal Aviation Administration, the plane, which was a Learjet 55 operated by Jet Rescue Air Ambulance, was carrying 6 passengers and had just departed from Northeast Philadelphia Airport en route to Springfield, Missouri, when it crashed shortly after takeoff, triggering an explosion that set several homes ablaze near the intersection of Roosevelt Boulevard and Cotman Avenue. Aside from the 6 passengers who have been confirmed as Mexicans, 1 person on the ground was also killed in the incident when a car was struck by falling debris, bringing the total loss of life to 7. Among the passengers was a young girl from Mexico who had recently received treatment at Shriners Children's Hospital, Philadelphia, and was traveling home with her mother and 4 crew members when the accident occurred. Local hospitals have reported treating at least 20 people for injuries related to the incident. Philadelphia Mayor Cheryl Parker describes the aftermath as chaotic, with debris spreading across 4 to 6 city blocks and additional fragments found in remote areas. In reaction to the tragedy, President Donald Trump expressed his condolences on social media, calling the incident a devastating loss of innocent lives and commending the efforts of first responders. Watch this.
Meanwhile, the National Transportation Safety Board has recovered the cockpit voice recorder and flight data recorder from the American Airlines passenger jet that collided with the U.S. Army Black Hawk helicopter late Wednesday near Reagan National Airport in Washington, D.C. Authorities are working to determine the cause of the devastating crash, which has left 67 people presumed dead. Search and recovery teams have so far retrieved more than 40 bodies from the Potomac River. President Donald Trump addressed the tragedy on Thursday, calling it a confluence of bad decisions that led to a violent and devastating loss of life. Meanwhile, American Airlines CEO Robert Isom expressed the company's full support for the families of the victims, stating that the airline's entire strength is focused on helping those affected. The passenger list included a group of young figure skaters, their families, and union steam fitters, all of whom were returning to the Washington area. The helicopter crew, which included 3 experienced Army pilots, was conducting a routine training mission from Fort Belvoir while the collision occurred. While authorities continue to investigate how such a disaster could happen in one of the most tightly controlled airspaces in the country, aviation expert Timothy Laranger noted that while mid-air military collisions are rare, recent upticks in such incidents raise concerns about pilot training, air traffic control, oversight, and equipment maintenance.
Yeah.
So, looking at the recent rash of, just aircraft incidents, I mean, these are two high-profile incidents in the span of days. It's, it's not a surprise, to see, Mr. LaRanger talking about, pilot training and different things. And it brings to mind a point, that President Trump mentioned when he was talking about DEI, because in his speech, he spoke about, how a lot of this may have come from DEI. And some people would have interpreted that, to think, oh, well, it's because the pilot was a minority or because the pilot was this, and that. But it's more in the sense that, there's certain positions where you just need the best. It doesn't matter what race, religion, or creed you belong to. You just need the best of the best there. So when you're pushing initiatives that, we're going to take people based on factors other than merit, when you step away from a meritocracy and you head, towards more biased selections, you can end up with issues like this. Because, I'm a Christian, full-fledged, right hand on the Bible and everything. But I'll tell you this right now. I don't care who my pilot is, as long as my pilot has their, requisite amount of hours and they have experience under their belt. Be from any creed, be from anywhere. As long as you have the merit for it, that's all that matters.
DGK, I would have to disagree. I don't know if this is because of DEI. I think that it's a tragic incident where a lot of people lost their lives. I think that once we hear what happened from the black box, we'll be able to have more insight as to what caused these crashes. We have seen numerous times across the U.S. where small engine planes crash and go down. In other cities, this happens numerous of times. So until we get the facts, until the investigation is concluded, then we'll be able to identify what happened with this plane crash in Philadelphia. And regarding the Black Hawk helicopter, I've seen in news reports they have automated Black Hawk helicopters that are flying. So maybe it was one of those automated helicopters that was flying at that time, even though it was reported that there were passengers and a pilot on board. Again, we won't know the facts until the full investigation is completed.
Very much agreed, and of course, special commendation, to those divers who went in the icy cold water first, to dive for bodies. I believe that they said, got to a point where they had to just call off the search after the night because they were already picking up so many bodies. And of course, at night, you're in frigid cold water. It's difficult.
Yeah.
But then, of course, they did end up going back to get the black box, which is important to be able, to piece the story together and to get them a full conclusion. So, I do want to give special commendation, to those divers who did that because, their work is vital in helping us come to a full conclusion and get a full understanding of truly, what happened over the Potomac River on Wednesday or a few days ago.
Yeah. I think that in that region, also, we have to maybe look at air traffic controllers. Are they overworked? Are they fatigued? Because that has been reported before.
That's very true.
This is not just in the U.S. There's also a plane crash in Korea as well, where passengers, died. So just the loss of life here, just condolences to the family and those who, lost their lives as a result of this tragic incident.
Definitely.
So maybe there needs to be more investigation into that region, those regional airports. Reagan Airport is not very far from Philadelphia's airport. Also, weather conditions. No one mentioned that. That may have caused it. A lot of times maintenance people like to rush and not go through the proper maintenance check. So maybe for that particular plane crash in Philadelphia, was there mechanical issues that wasn't caught before the plane took off. So again, we won't know the full details until that investigation is completely done. Former North Dakota Governor Doug Burgum has been confirmed as Interior Secretary in an overwhelming bipartisan vote of 79 to 18. In addition, the Senate is preparing to cast final votes on two other Trump cabinet nominees, Chris Wright for Energy Secretary and former Representative Doug Collins for Veterans Affairs Secretary, marking another step in solidifying the administration's leadership team. Three of President Trump's most vulnerable cabinet picks have also testified before Senate committees. During his hearing for FBI Director nominee, Kush Patel rejected claims that he might use the Bureau to target political opponents of President Trump, dismissing such assertions as a mischaracterization. Take a look.
Senator, this may be one of the scenarios that most uniquely qualifies me to take command at the FBI. Having been the victim of government overreach and a weaponized system of justice and law enforcement, I know what it feels like to have the full weight of the United States government barreling down on you. And as the Biden Inspector General determined, those activities by the FBI and DOJ were wholly improper and not predicated upon law and facts. I will ensure, if confirmed, that no American is subjected to that kind of torment, to that kind of cost, financially and personally. And most importantly, I will make sure that no American is subjected to death threats like I was, and subjected to moving their residences like I was, because of government overreach, because of leaks of information about my personal status. If confirmed as FBI Director, Mr. Chairman, you have my commitment that no one in this country will feel that pain.
Senator.
Meanwhile, National Intelligence Director nominee Tulsi Gabbard faced repeated, often fiery questioning from both Republicans and Democrats regarding her past praise for NSA leaker Edward Snowden and comments that appeared to show sympathy for Russia on Ukraine-related matters. Senators on the Intelligence Committee expressed mixed reactions to Gabbard's responses. While Senator Susan Collins from Maine said she was satisfied with her answers, especially after a classified session where her responses reportedly improved, others, like Senator James Lankford from Oklahoma and Senator John Curtis from Utah, voiced concern that her answers only raised more questions about her judgment. Moderate Democrats, including Senator Mark Warner from Virginia, a Democrat, have signaled their opposition, suggesting that if all 47 Democrats vote against her, Gabbard could only lose 3 Republican votes on the Senate floor and still fail to secure confirmation. Watch this.
Former U.S. Representative Tulsi Gabbard, President Donald Trump's choice to be the Director of National Intelligence, faced harsh criticism of her past defense of former National Security Agency contractor Edward Snowden and comments seen as supportive of Russia at a confirmation hearing on Thursday. While in the House of Representatives, Gabbard introduced legislation that would have dropped charges against Snowden, a former government contractor who leaked thousands of National Security Agency documents and then fled to Russia. Senators on the panel, both Republicans and Democrats, pressed her to address if she believed he was a traitor. Here's Republican Senator James Lankford.
So was Edward Snowden a traitor?
Senator, my heart is with my commitment to our Constitution and our nation's security.
Ours too. Was he a traitor at the time when he took America's secrets, released them in public, and then ran to China and became a Russian citizen?
Senator, I'm focused on the future and how we can prevent something like this from happening again.
Here's Democratic Senator Michael Bennet.
So let me ask you again, do you believe, as the chairman of this committee believes, as the vast majority of members of our intelligence agencies believe, that Edward Snowden was a traitor to the United States of America?
Senator, if confirmed
This
as
is when the
Director of
rubber
National
hits the road.
Intelligence,
This is
I
when-
will
this is
work
not-
with you to make sure that there is not
a
another
moment for
Snowden-like
social
leak.
media. It's not a moment to propagate theories, conspiracy theories, or attacks on journalism in the United States. This is when you need to answer the questions of the people whose votes you're asking for to be confirmed as the chief intelligence officer of this nation.
Gabbard is a former Democrat and combat veteran without deep intelligence experience. If confirmed, she would serve as the nation's top spy, overseeing all 18 U.S. intelligence agencies. She has expressed views seen as echoing Russia's justification of its war against Ukraine. criticized U.S. involvement in Syria, and had a 2017 meeting with Moscow-backed former Syrian President Bashar al-Assad. She tried to get in front of this in her opening statement.
Those who oppose my nomination imply that I am loyal to something or someone other than God, my own conscience, and the Constitution of the United States. Accusing me of being Trump's puppet, Putin's puppet, Assad's puppet, a guru's puppet, Modi's puppet, not recognizing the absurdity of simultaneously being the puppet of 5 different puppet masters. The same tactic was used against President Trump and failed.
Democratic Senator Mark Warner expressed his disapproval of some of Gabbard's comments and his opposition to her nomination.
You blame NATO for Russia's 2022 invasion of Ukraine. You rejected the conclusion that Assad used chemical weapons in Syria.
Republican Senator Tom Cotton, the committee's chairman, told Fox News he backed Gabbard's nomination. Her hearing continued Thursday afternoon in a closed session to address classified information.
Additionally, Department of Health and Human Services nominee Robert F. Kennedy Jr. faced a second day of tough questioning from the Health, Education, Labor, and Pensions Committees over his anti-vaccine activism and other controversial views, following earlier scrutiny by the Finance Committee. During the hearings, RFK dramatically turned the tables on his critics, suggesting that some of the members of the Congress of corruption, including some of those who had questioned him. In a particularly incendiary exchange with Senator Bernie Sanders, he alleged the senator had received over $1.5 million from the pharmaceutical companies, alleging that Sanders' rhetoric and actions were symptomatic of the systemic corruption plaguing Washington. This unexpected outburst added a new layer of tension to the proceedings, leaving many lawmakers and observers taken aback by RFK's blunt accusations and unfiltered candor. Let's watch this.
Those of us who are trying to transform our energy system and, in fact, keep America healthy by addressing the crisis of climate change. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Senator Sanders. And now I'd like to welcome our nominee, Mr. Robert F. Kennedy, Jr. Mr. Kennedy has a long career as an attorney and advocate for various health and environmental concerns. He has championed a range of issues like healthy foods and efforts to fight chronic disease, while calling for greater transparency and accountability in our public health infrastructure. Mr. Kennedy has an important opportunity to reform the department and to restore trust in our federal health agencies. I look forward to hearing more about his policy priorities and his plans to advance President Trump's agenda to make America healthy again. I thank you for joining us today, and I'll now turn over to Mr. Kennedy to introduce himself. Is your microphone on? Is your microphone on?
Thank you, Chairman Cassidy. Thank you, Senator Sanders. Ranking members and Ranking Member Senator Sanders and other members of this distinguished committee, Cheryl and I were heartbroken last night to learn the tragic accident that took so many of our fellow Americans, including our service members. We are in an apartment where we were able to see the rescue operations from our window. Senator Marshall, please know that I will continue. There you are. I'll continue to pray for you, as I texted you last night, for those who were lost, who called your state home, as well as Senators Kaine and also Brooks. We appreciate the first responders and local officials who are working so hard. May God continue to be with us.
As the confirmation process continues, these contentious hearings underscore the deep partisan divisions and high stakes involved in confirming key members of President Trump's cabinet. So, honestly, as I've been watching and keeping up with these cabinet nominations, it's funny because, usually these things are almost ceremonial. The president selects members of his cabinet. Congress, they do their little, pony show. You ask questions, you grill them a bit, you go tough on them. But more often than not, you typically pass them through. this is the first time in a while that I've actually seen, there's a big concern that Tulsi Gabbard may not go through, And this is not like, Pete Hegseth, who's not a career politician, who doesn't have experience in those spaces, Tulsi Gabbard is a career politician. She had worked in politics before this. She had even run for president before. So now she's coming in, for the pretty much, the chief information officer for the United States. And it's like they're trying to throw haymakers at her. And one of the biggest things, of course, is that they're trying to bring up this law that, that the U.S. is trying to pass, which pretty much gives the United States permission, to surveil foreigners abroad, which is why a lot of the lawmakers brought up the whole Edward Snowden situation, because Edward Snowden was talking about, the government surveilling, citizens and foreigners inside the country without their knowledge, through expanded rights of the Patriot Act, which was passed, of course, after 9/11, to increase government, support in catching terrorists and preventing another 9/11, was pretty much, part of a whole anti-terrorism bill that was passed. So watching just her confirmation alone, they've been trying to pin her back, hey, Snowden leaked this. You've spoken favorably about Snowden because, of course, there are also divided opinions about Snowden.
Yeah.
Some consider him a hero because he leaked what the government was doing, which was an overextension of their powers.
Yeah.
And, of course, the government works for the people. The people aren't repressed by the government. Government are supposed to work for their people.
Yeah.
So when the government does something against their people, it's not necessarily a bad thing that should be brought to light. You look at Watergate being brought to light. You look at the Tuskegee experiments being brought to light. So it's not necessarily a bad thing to have leakers or, to have whistleblowers, because sometimes the whistle doesn't need to be blown. But in Tulsi Gabbard's case, it's just about, keeping things constitutional, keeping things fair. Because it's one thing to spy on people inside your own country. When you start spying on people outside another country, outside of your country, going into foreign jurisdiction, there's a lot of things that you're leaving up to chance to happen in foreign waters, which then, once you start taking things to international court, things get murky. And all of a sudden, a lot of things that China's been accused of, over recent years through Huawei and their companies, which is one of the reasons, that they're trying to pressure ByteDance into selling TikTok, because, of course, ByteDance is controlled by the CCP, is because of surveillance.
Yeah.
So then do you now push the U.S. to become like the CCP? Of course,
No.
Through our prayers, we know that they won't.
Yeah.
But, do you now push for extended surveillance of foreign nationals in other countries, that you're not in? So it's kind of a slippery slope, when you look at it. And then, of course, you look at Kash Patel.
Yeah.
And they are trying to grill him, pretty much as this radical, But of course, this is, a government, track, not necessarily a politician, but, he'd worked with the Trump administration before.
Yeah.
He was part of the security team before, so he knows his stuff.
Yeah.
But he's also a person who's not afraid to speak on it.
Yeah.
And I feel like, especially with this latest Trump administration, especially compared to the previous one, a lot of that political candor is gone. There's no more beating around the bush.
I think because of the experience that they had the last term. So just taking that experience, knowing what to expect, how to approach things, I think so just leading from that standpoint.
Yeah, 100%, because, you're hearing the way that Trump is speaking now,
Yeah. More confidence, bolder.
Exactly, because, he learned that, sometimes playing the political game, while it might, curry favor in Congress, in the Senate, it doesn't really do good for the American people.
And he's not a politician. Keep in mind that President Trump is a businessman. He comes from a business background. So the way
very true.
His perception is, the way he thinks is more related to his business background.
That's actually very true. And it's tying into so many things, You even look at RFK and, it's like you're looking at the people that he's pulling people that, many people wouldn't necessarily consider, well, these are politicians, like Pete Hegseth, was a former Fox News anchor.
Yeah.
he wasn't a politician, but, now he's head of one of the most important cabinets in the United States, which shows his ability, to break from the norm if something's not working.
Yeah.
Because one of the things that he ran on initially, and one was the fact that, hey, I'm not a career politician. Career politicians have been messing up the country. Maybe we need to take a look outside, and bring in somebody who's outside of the swamp, outside of the whole, dog and pony show, to actually put this country where it belongs, at the top, of the world.
Where it always has been, right? So we can see that within this past administration, so many things have been done to break down different industries across government. So having non-political figures in this seats, I think, brings a different approach.
Definitely. And you look at the way that they were talking to RFK. I remember, there was something that he said about, he was talking about, how pretty much the country is over-medicated.
Yeah, it's very true.
It's totally true. But the kind of response that he got from the government, the officials there, was like, he was saying something that different medical reports have never talked about, which they clearly have.
He
even said something very controversial, that, African Americans shouldn't be on the same vaccine schedule as Caucasians because they have a stronger immune system.
And that's very true, but he is the only one who has that confidence and that authority to speak about this because of the research that he's done, the years of work that he's done in the vaccine space. He's done a lot of work. He's even sued some pharmaceutical companies against, some of these vaccines. So I think he is the right person for the job as a health, secretary for the U.S. He wants the country to be healthy. Look how all of these chronic diseases plague American citizens. Diabetes, hypertension, high cholesterol, heart attacks, you name it. All of these diseases plague Americans. And having someone in that position to say, hey, we need to get healthy. We need to ensure that our school lunches for children are healthy, right? We need to also make sure that we're doing every step in government to help Americans to become more healthier, so that way we can lessen the disease or these chronic illnesses that they suffer from.
And that's entirely correct. If you look at the data, before 1960, the rate of chronic diseases in Americans was actually under double digits. But somehow from the 1960s to the 2000s, it's now reported that over 42% of Americans face chronic illnesses.
Obesity as well. It's processed food.
There's so many things, and you look at it. We're making medical innovations every day.
We are.
So why are the chronic illnesses going up?
Yeah.
If anything, it should be lowering.
It should be, yeah.
Unless there's something that the government and of course health administration time and time again has failed to notice. Or
they know. Of course
but they also noticed the checks that Big Pharma was putting in their pockets.
Absolutely. Follow the money and you'll see.
Exactly. So, it's one of those things where, for the viewers watching at home, you might see these people, and trust me, the cabinet picks are definitely characters. These are not your regular career politicians. They will not speak like a career politician. But when you see them, know that they're coming from a background that's more similar to you than the people who sit in suits and debate legislation, and then, of course, take vacations. You come in, you debate legislation, you see which company paid you the most money, which industry paid you the most, and, through them lobbying, and you vote, their way, and then you go back to take a vacation, in your fancy lake house until it's time to show up somewhere.
We saw that a lot with the previous administration. So now this mix up and this change, of course, people don't like change. People don't like to do things that's uncomfortable or takes them away from a position of comfort and that cushy, long, extensive position that they've been having. So of course, people are going to not be okay with it,
Yeah, but of course, like they say, the only thing that's constant is change.
Yes, that's
so
true.
It's a beautiful thing, and hopefully, the nominees do get passed. Of course, you saw the step forward that the U.S. took in withdrawing from the WHO, like the man of God, Pastor Chris, has been speaking about. The right steps have already, started being taken.
Yeah.
As hopefully through these nominees being pushed and confirmed, the right steps will be solidified when they actually are able to take their offices and push forward, the right legislation.
Yeah, and TGK, just to add what you're saying, in addition to Pastor Chris praying for President Trump, he's also praying for the administration. Just church leaders, ministers, pastors around the world, led by Pastor Chris, have been praying for his administration, that these political figures are put in place to help direct America in the right direction.
Definitely. And America in the right direction, they definitely will direct. We'll be right back after this break.
The golden age of America begins right now. America's decline is over. We will be working to meet every crisis with dignity and power and strength. We will move with purpose and speed to bring back hope, prosperity, safety, and peace for citizens of every race, religion, color, and creed. For American citizens, January 20th, 2025 is Liberation Day. In everything we do, my administration will be inspired by a strong pursuit of excellence and unrelenting success. America will reclaim its rightful place as the greatest, most powerful, most respected nation on earth. I am with you. I will fight for you, and I will win for you. We will not be conquered. We will not be intimidated. We will not be broken, and we will not fail. From this day on, the United States of America will be a free, sovereign, and independent nation. We will stand bravely. We will live proudly. We will dream boldly, and nothing will stand in our way because we are Americans. The future is ours, and our golden age has just begun.
Welcome back. In a move that aligns with President Donald Trump's recent executive order on gender definitions, the U.S. House of Representatives have passed a bill that prohibits transgender women from competing in women's school sports. Lawmakers backing the legislation argue that maintaining traditional definitions of gender is essential to ensuring fairness in female athletics, contending that allowing individuals assigned male at birth to participate in women's sports could create competitive imbalances. Proponents of the bill assess that the measures is necessary to preserve equal opportunities for female athletes. They claim that sports competition should be based on an immutable biological classification, therefore safeguarding the integrity of women's sports against perceived competitive advantages. The new law echoes President Trump's executive order titled Defending Women from Gender Ideology, Extremism, and Restoring Biological Truth to the federal government. The order mandates that federal agencies recognize only two biological sexes defined as immutable characteristics determined at conception, and directs those agencies to enforce sex-based rights and protections accordingly. With the White House votes, the legislation reinforces the administration's stance on gender definitions and signals its commitment to upholding what is considered the integrity of women's sports. As the measure moves forward, supporters have hope it will establish a consistent standard for athletic competition in schools, while critics warn that it could marginalize transgender athletes and fuel broader debates over gender identity and inclusion. I think that this is a step in the right direction. There are two genders, there's male and female. And to insert that transgender women can play women's sports is a disservice and dishonor to female athletes who spend time training and competing. So, TGK, what's your take on it?
I mean, honestly, if I could just read quickly, my take is, Genesis 5, chapter 1. This is the written account of Adam's family line. When God created mankind, he made them in the likeness of God. He created them male and female and blessed them, and he named them mankind when they were created. You know, like Pastor Chris likes to say, you know, that when people ask what's his opinion, you know, what's his take, he doesn't have a take, he doesn't have an opinion. His opinion or take is the word of God.
Let's watch this video.
The Capitol, everybody. Good afternoon. This is a great day for women in America. Yes, wait, that's an applause line. House Republicans have yet again stood up for women. This is a commitment that we have made because it comports with what is right and what is common sense. We know from Scripture and from nature that men are men and women are women, and men cannot become women. It's sad that we have to say that. It's a matter of biology. It's how we're made. And if we try to ignore that or to undo it, we do so at our peril and to the detriment of our daughters. Across the country, female athletes like Riley Gaines and Paula Scanlon and Peyton McNabb have had to compete head-to-head against biological men. It's just not right. Around the world, it's estimated that more than 700 female athletes have been displaced by males in their women's sporting events. And that has resulted in more than 1,000 estimated medals, records, and scholarships intended for women going to men. My own daughters competed in sports as they were growing up, and I can only imagine the anger I would feel as a dad if they had their trophies stolen from them. But that's indeed what many women are facing today. And it's not just anger, it's fear. Biological men competing against women also poses a threat to the safety of our girls. It's dangerous, it's unfair, it's a rejection of reality, and it is just plain wrong. But today, the House voted to uphold common sense again. We voted to require all schools receiving federal funds to uphold the original meaning of Title IX and keep biological men out of women's sports. Last Congress, we voted on this legislation as well. We will note that not one single Democrat joined us. Today was an improvement. It's bipartisan. We had 2 Democrats join us. Yes. But it's shameful. There should have been many, many more. In fact, I would argue that every member of this body should have voted for common sense and to protect women. And for some reason, for politics, I guess, they chose not to. The American people sent a clear message in November. They want us to return to common sense, but it appears that some of our friends in the other party are ignoring that plea. This Congress, we have the power of a Republican Senate, and we will have Donald J. Trump return to the White House in less than a week. That is going to be a sea change around here, and we can't wait. And together, we're making good on our campaign promises. We couldn't have done it without Greg Steube, my colleague from Florida, who's behind me here, who's been pressing this issue for so many years and providing great leadership. We're grateful for that leadership, and it's good to see the hard work rewarded on a day like this.
That is beautiful. You know, like we say, you know, every step forward is a step in the right direction. So, I mean, you know, like I was saying, of course, like the Bible says in Genesis, you know, that God made man and woman, and he blessed them and called them mankind. You know, so unless you're of a different kind, and no, I don't mean the God kind, unless you're of a different kind, then mankind, you know, is just to be a male and a female. And, you know, some people may say, you know, well, let people be, you know, let people have their expressions. And I mean, you look at it simply, this is a competition, you know, between men and women. And furthermore, if anything, you know, there have been different waves of the feminist movement, but I feel like for women, this is a massive leap backwards in the wrong direction, because now instead of women being able to advance, you have men who think that they're women entering female spaces and taking away from their achievements. So what women would have achieved, you now have men achieving it, but somehow that's equality and somehow that's balanced, you know. And it's always struck me as odd, you know, because of course there have been different complaints of men, you know, dominating fields that women should dominate. You know, there's a funny thing, you know, that somebody was speaking to me about where they said, you know, that of course in the household, more women cook than men typically. But in the professional, you know, cooking industry, you typically tend to have more male chefs than female chefs, although most cooks commonly are women. So it feels like this is not necessarily an amalgamation to that, but, you know, you're having women, you know, well, you're having men, you know, break different swimming records, basketball records, football records, you know, and in any kind of contact sport, of course, there's a genetic advantage being a man who believes that they're a woman. And now you're having women just, I mean, losing, you know, unfairly because they're competing in the wrong division. Because once you add a man to the female division, that is no longer the right division, no matter what they identify as. Because, it is good to have an identity, but again, as we know, and as we should all understand, first and foremost, the only real identity is in Christ. But even outside of that, just as a human being speaking human to human, there is the male identity and there's female identity. Anything else outside of that is a fantasy, and it only hurts what we have worked so hard to build in society, which is equality for men and for women in the places that matter the most. Barbara?
I agree with you. I think that as a young child, I was competing in sports. So I can just imagine having a man or boy that thinks it's a girl or a woman competing against me in sports will dominate just their genetic makeup, just who they are as a person, what God created them to be, to dominate and win over me because they're stronger, they're faster. That's not fair. So I agree with what you said, and I'm happy to see this move. The previous administration did a lot to force this indoctrination, to force this upon Americans and people across the world. And I'm happy to see that this administration is taking a stand, taking a word on God, and bringing back what is right. So I'm so happy to see this,
Yeah, like the politician said, last time they voted on this, they had 0 votes from the Democratic Party. Now it's become bipartisan because they got 2 votes. Honestly,
it should have been all of the votes. Honestly, it should have been all of them.
I couldn't have worded it any better. It should have been all of them, because, like the politician was saying, this is a common sense issue.
Yeah.
Men who believe that they're women should not be competing with women.
No. I know, it's even saying it sounds funny, right?
It's almost laughable because I'm thinking to myself, if I say, I identify as a dog, would I not go down to the Greyhound track and, line up and lap 8?
Are you going to be eating dog food? Come on. Common sense.
There's such a thing as accepting, and accepting differences.
Yes.
But there's a level that you get to, where it comes back full circle, and you see that it's nonsense. Of course, people are different, but there's a level to what's different and then what's just absurd, you know. And then, of course, another thing that I'd like to touch on is the ages, that these kind of ideologies are coming in through. Because, of course, like the thing, this is going all the way, to pre-college sports.
Yeah.
So you're
High
having
school,
children.
Middle school.
You're having children, who can't buy alcohol, who can't buy cigarettes.
Who can't vote.
Who can't drive a car.
Yeah.
If you have a 15-year-old talking about, I want to get married, you might entertain it, but if they were being serious, you would call them, you would say, hey, that's not what you need to be focusing on now.
Yeah.
But, I want, I'm a girl and I think, that I'm actually a boy.
I feel like, that.
Oh,
okay.
that's, it's like the Overton window for common sense is just being shifted and shifted and shifted.
Confusion,
that when you're
God.
speaking common sense, now it's like you're speaking like a radical.
Yeah.
But this wasn't radical 20 to 30 years ago. It was just, it was what was believed and what was accepted, So it's one of those things that, of course, you have to be grateful for President Trump's administration, for coming in and taking hard stances. Because sometimes when you go too soft on these things, it's like little foxes, little foxes spoil the vine. You go soft on them, you give them an inch.
And they take a mile.
And then they take a mile, and by the time, they've taken the whole track, and there's no more miles left for them to take.
But not only that, TGK, that is also a way to start breaking down society as well. While you start with this small doses where men that identify as women can now compete against women in sports, then who knows what's next? But thank God for this administration under President Donald Trump, because that indoctrination is being canceled in the name of Jesus. Amen. Amen. And we can see that God is present. God's spirit is right with the administration and across America, just bringing back that foundation and the principles of having God at the center. Yeah.
Amen. And that was well put. And, to, I guess, round off this segment, there was a quote from, well, I'll just put on, as a wise Japanese citizen. And, he was talking to somebody about jaywalking in Japan. And they said, well, like, why would you stop me? Like, people jaywalk everywhere. And he said something that was so profound to me that has stuck with me to this day. And he said, that the fall of society begins with a single person. Yeah. So it's good, of course, to see the government tackling society as a whole. But it's also important, that we as people, because like I said, once you let one thing start with one person,
it just opens the door.
Yeah, I mean, it goes from an ember to a wildfire. Yeah. But, these common sense policies are going to take the nation like a wildfire. Amen. President Donald Trump has announced that he will move forward with aggressive new tariffs on Canada, Mexico, and China from February 1st. He made this assertion while speaking to reporters at a White House event, where he emphasized that varying tariffs would be applied to different categories of product. While the specific tariff rates have not been fully disclosed, President Trump is generally advocating for a 25% tariff on imports from Mexico and Canada and a 10% tariff from China and Canadian oil. The administration is expected to introduce a process for case-by-case exemptions, though officials warned that such exemptions will be limited. The planned tariffs are part of Trump's broader efforts to pressure Canada and Mexico into taking stronger action to curb illegal immigration and combat the flow of fentanyl into the United States. President Donald Trump is expected to sign an executive order to enforce the tariffs, potentially making them retroactive. However, the uncertainty over the specifics of Mr. Trump's proposed tariffs have left global businesses guessing about the potential economic fallout. Experts have suggested that these tariffs could significantly impact the economies of the U.S., Canada, and Mexico, pushing up consumer prices and affecting jobs, with the brunt of the damage likely to hit the smaller economies of Canada and Mexico. In recent weeks, both Mexican and Canadian officials have ramped up their efforts to prevent the tariffs from taking effect. Canada, for instance, has bolstered its border security with additional staff, drones, and Black Hawk helicopters, while its officials have been actively lobbying key Republican lawmakers in the United States. Meanwhile, Mexico has shown cooperation in aspects of President Trump's immigration crackdown by accepting thousands of deported migrants, although it too is preparing to counter the tariffs. U.S. stock markets closed lower on Friday as investors reacted with anxiety to the looming tariffs and their potential repercussions. Meanwhile, lobbying groups representing industries such as retail and agriculture, sectors that could be among the hardest hit by retaliatory measures, are scrambling for detailed information about the impending tariffs. But so far, the specifics remain elusive. And, honestly, Barbara, it's one of those things where, like we saw with Colombia last week, former President Theodore Roosevelt, said, speak softly, but carry a big stick. And that was part of his policy measures where, when he wanted to get something done, some countries are just like, do this or we go to war, do this or we impose this, and that on you. President Trump, said, hey, I'm going to put this out there. The border is an issue. Yeah. The opioid crisis has been an issue for years now. Mm-hmm. We need to fix this. Yeah. Can we get it done? And, when you see people, sitting on their hands, not taking it seriously, after you've spoken softly, that may mean that it's time, to bring out the big stick. Or
put some fire under them.
Yeah, light a fire under them, Mm-hmm. And now, as we see these tariffs, of course, you see Canada actually, I believe, a few minutes ago, the prime minister, or, the prime minister in passing, because he's about to leave, Trudeau, was saying that, Canada is already preparing, retaliatory measures that are actually, scheduled to hit red states, and affect Republican states more than other states. Okay. Mexico, their finance minister has already said, that they're willing to fight, that it's going to be a fight, and they're not going to take it standing. So, of course, they're planning to impose counter tariffs. But it's one of those things that you have to find a way to get it done. Yeah. They weren't listening when you were talking, of course, because you would speak about it, the North American leaders, they have their conferences where they sit down and they talk, but obviously they're not listening. But you know what people listen to? They listen to money.
Action. Yeah.
They listen to their economy.
Yeah. That's true.
And there was something that President Trump mentioned as he was talking about the tariffs, and he mentioned that in the early 1900s, the economy was actually booming, I believe, from 1860 till about 1913, or sometime in the 1910s. The U.S. economy pretty much grew solely through tariffs.
Yeah. And you know what, TGK? We have a really great video we're going to take a look at.
All right.
Other countries charge us tariffs. We don't charge them tariffs. And it's about time that that changes.
U.S. President Donald Trump on Saturday will implement 25% tariffs against Canada and Mexico and 10% on Chinese goods.
Tariffs don't cause inflation, they cause success. They cause big success. So we're going to have great success. There could be some temporary short-term disruption, and people will understand that.
Earlier, Canadian Prime Minister Justin Trudeau vowed a forceful response to any new U.S. tariffs.
We won't relent until tariffs are removed, and of course, everything is on the table.
Mexican President Claudia Sheinbaum has said Trump's tariffs would cost 400,000 U.S. jobs and drive up prices for American consumers. Trump's order and retaliatory tariffs from Canada and Mexico threaten to disrupt nearly $1.6 trillion in North American trade, as well as effectively end a 30-year free trade system that has deeply integrated the three economies. The largest sector by far to be affected by new tariffs would be autos and auto parts. Clark Packard of the Cato Institute explains.
The U.S., Mexico, and Canada have pretty tightly integrated supply chains. So the average car made in the U.S. or in the Mexico, Canada, U.S. zone tends to travel across borders up to 8 times. And so if you're imposing a tariff of 25% each time a part comes across the border, or if the whole automobile crosses the border, it's going to get pretty costly pretty quickly.
Mexico and Canada account for...
Welcome back. President Donald Trump has announced a major initiative to reinstate military service members who were discharged for refusing the COVID-19 vaccine mandate. The move represents a significant reversal of a controversial policy implemented during the Biden administration, which President Trump has criticized as detrimental to the morale and readiness of the armed forces. The reinstatement plan aligns with his broader agenda to roll back what he considers unfair and unharmful policies from the previous administration. President Trump emphasizes the importance of respecting individual freedoms and protecting the careers of those who serve the nation. The plan includes provisions for full reinstatement, back pay, and the restoration of rank for those affected. The announcement sparked renewed debate over vaccine mandates and their role in public health and military readiness. Supporters of President Trump's decision argue that the mandates unfairly penalize individuals for personal health choices and led to the loss of experienced personnel in critical roles. They view the reinstatement as a step towards justice and an acknowledgement of the sacrifices service members make for their country. The reinstatement initiative is expected to be a key talking point as President Trump continues to shape the administration's agenda, reinforcing his commitment to service members and addressing policies he views as divisive or discriminatory. Watch this.
Tens of thousands of service members who were kicked out because of an experimental vaccine. In President Trump's Defense Department, they will be apologized to. They will be reinstituted with pay and rank.
I think that it's really great to see that a lot of military personnel that was discharged from the military back and reinstated simply because they made a personal choice, a personal decision not to be vaccinated. Pastor Chris Oyakilame spoke about COVID-19 during the pandemic, as we saw. And so it's great to see that people are now being able to take back their position in power for employment. TGK?
100%, and of course you look at what the White House came out and said recently, that their leading belief now with COVID, is that it was a lab leak, which the man of God, Pastor Chris, had been saying for a while.
Yeah.
And of course, another thing, that he said is, is that God is a wonderful God, that he can restore what the cankerworm has eaten, So it's beautiful, to see these people, who had just, they were discharged, receive back pay. So, that is their restoration of, although they weren't working, they should have been working.
Yeah.
And so, they got paid fairly what was unfairly taken from them, due to something that the White House is now calling a lab leak versus, the whole bat and pangolin theory, that was ruminating around earlier.
And Pastor Chris had been saying, and since the beginning of the pandemic, that it was leaked by lab. He had been, just led by the Spirit to expose this. Even now, the actual truth is coming out, but Pastor Chris has already had warned people and educating them and informing them of what is really happening behind the scenes.
Yeah, and putting that together, it's a beautiful thing, because like one of the things that we know that the man of God says often, if you stick to the word, you come back with a testimony. So, these people, stuck to their beliefs, and they stuck to the truth, that they knew. Mm-hmm. And, they came back with a testimony, of back pay and, of course, getting their jobs back, And, of course, nobody wants to get fired. But, if you get fired, and you're able to go out and work another job, and then your old job comes back and says, hey, we were wrong. Here's all of the money that you weren't while you weren't working, on top of the money that you made while you were working somewhere else, and your job back. Of course, I would have been upset that I was discharged.
Yeah.
But, like the Bible says, a soft answer turneth away wrath. And I feel like, the White House and this administration, really put together a soft answer for the discharged soldiers.
I think that we also need to see it for those employees who were not in the military and were terminated because they refused the vaccine, and also those who were denied jobs because they refused to take the vaccine as well.
Yeah, and of course, that would be a good thing, to have. But, of course, the difference, between the public and the private sector might be a bit tough to implement in that manner. But, we can hope and we can pray, that different private sector companies come to that realization.
That's great insight. And that's the news that's News Plus for today. Remember, join us same time tomorrow for more news. I'm Barbara Sam.
And I'm TGK Dre.
Good night, and God bless you.